This show is brought to you by IslamicMusicHub.com, Nasheed reviews, prayer maps, and more.
Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Kareem. First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude to Mr. Faisal for initiating this project to support Gazans. So thanks Mr. Faisal, and may Allah bless your efforts. Here is Nourhan. I'm 25. I live in the middle area of Gaza Strip, particularly in Deir al-Balah. I'm recording this for the Islamic Music Hub to talk about my story before, during, and after the war. I cannot be sure if I will survive to tell my story after the war. And no one knows when could this nightmare end. But we hope it will end in the near future, inshallah. I can say that our lives were blooming before the war. Our lives were good before events of October 7th, despite the siege and restrictions imposed on Gaza. And regardless the closures of crossings, we can say that our lives were good. We've been living in partial peace. As you know, this is not the first war in Gaza. And we know that we were vulnerable and may be attacked any time. As for me, as Nourhan, actually I lived 7 wars since I was born. But I admit that this one is the most severe, terrifying, and harsh war. Before the war, I was working as a freelancer translator, but due to the internet and electricity shortage and continuous power cut, I couldn't depend on freelancing to get enough money for me and my family. So I tried hard to find another job, and I cannot tell you how much it is hard here in Gaza to find a good job. After much struggle in the scarce job market, I found an opportunity to work as an English trainer with UFA, and at the same time I worked as an English teacher at UCAS University. To be honest, that time was the best days of my life. I enjoyed my time very much with my students. We used to hold Skype sessions with foreigners. That's to encourage my students, to make them more confident, to motivate them to improve their language, and mainly to give them a chance to talk about their suffer as Palestinians, and to let them talk to the other world and defend their Palestinian case. To tell the other world what is going here in Palestine. I don't forget our educational and our recreational trips together and our outdoor activities. I really miss everything. I miss my students and I miss our activities together. By the way, I have students at the same age of mine and others are older than me. That's why I deal with them as my friends. We are more than being a teacher and students. In addition, or beside doing 2 jobs and having a full timetable, I was following up my master degree. I was about getting my master degree before the war. I can say that I was a teacher and a student at the same time. It was really interesting. I used to leave my home at 8 a.m. and back home at 4, 6 or 8 p.m. I was really happy, even though it was hard, even it was difficult, but I was really over the moon with my daily routine. In addition to my career, I had a nice social life before the war. I used to exchange visits with families, friends, and celebrate together. and go to the parks, to the beach, and have lunch with my colleagues, friends, or students after lectures, then back to university. It was really a good life, but unfortunately, all of this didn't last a long time. We lost our security. We lost our families, friends, homes, jobs. We lost everything. But we still have our hopes. I will talk about my story and be sure this is not only my own story. It's the story of all Gazans. During the war, I remember well the day when our neighbors were bombed. Many children and women were killed that day. The most thing that penetrated me that day is the death of my neighbor Razan. She was only 3 years. They found her body without a head under the screen, and they found her head after 2 days of searching. Her mother and her sister Rahaf was about 8 years, also killed at the same day. Only the father and a 6-year-old boy called Khalid are alive. I know Khalid well. Khalid is an active boy. I used to see him playing, jumping, laughing with the children in the streets. But now I hope to see his smile. After he had lost his mom and his 2 sisters, Khalid became depressed. And I hope if I could do anything just to let him get out of his depression. At that day, our house was partly damaged, and my brother's house also damaged at that day. My older brother is Muhammad. He is married and he has a family of 6 members. He has 2 daughters and 2 sons. He evacuated to my home because his home became unsafe and the roof is not safe for the children. So Muhammad is living with us nowadays with his family. And my grandfather also evacuated to my home at the beginning of this war. My grandfather told us that this war is similar to what happened in 1948. If you know this date, 1948, it's called the Nakba catastrophe. My grandfather said that we are living another catastrophe. We are living another Nakba, if not worse. After that genocide that happened to our neighbors, my grandfather fell into severe depression because what happened reminded him of his painful past. I mean his loss in 1948 when he lost his family at that year. My grandfather couldn't bear the life conditions at that time and the lack of food and water. He's an old man and he needs a good nutrition. He also needs a blood pressure medication, which wasn't available after the closures of crossings. So, on the 10th of December 2023, my grandfather passed away after he had a heart attack, just 1 week after our neighbors were bombed. May Allah have mercy upon them all. During the war, we also lost my cousin and her little son. My cousin was only 23 and her little son was 2 years. They were killed during the war and I don't know what is their fault. How could a child of 2 years killed in that way? I also don't forget the day when my relatives had to evacuate to our home after the occupation forces had raided their homes. On December 15th at exactly 6:30 a.m., While we were sleeping, we all surprised once my cousins found my dad. They were crying and running. They told us that the forests attacked them while they were sleeping, and they managed, alhamdulillah, to leave the house, but without taking anything with them. So some of them reached our home and others lost their way to our home. My dad and my brothers went to search for them despite the dangerous situation at that time, and they brought them to our home. They were about 35 people. Most of them were children and women. The women and children stayed with us at the same home, and the rest of family, including the young men, had to sleep in plastic tents. Unfortunately, because our home couldn't accommodate all of them, it's not big enough. One important thing that I can mention about that day is my Uncle Abid. My Uncle Abid were not able to evacuate his home that day because he has a disabled girl. She's about 22 years and she cannot walk or run. So the whole family stayed at home with their disabled daughter. They do not want to leave her alone. They forced to stay in that dangerous area. On January 13th, two of my cousins, Mahmoud and Uday, went to my uncle's home in Al Zawaida village. I'm talking about my Uncle Abid. They wanted to Al Zawaida village to my Uncle Abid home because they want to give him some food and some water. They went in the early morning, and after 2 hours, a third cousin called Ahmed followed them to Al Zawaida. But Ahmed went to Al Zawaida to bring some clothes for his children. Ahmed is married and he has 2 daughters and 1 son. As I mentioned before, they left their home without taking anything with them. So now the 3 cousins, Ahmed, Mahmoud and Uday, went to Al Zawaida on the early morning and none of them back. Suddenly, as we were preparing to pray Al-Maghrib, we heard screams and we rushed to the door to find my uncle, who has a disabled daughter, crying and screaming at our door with his family. We were shocked. A few minutes later, they told us that Mahmoud and Uday, who went to give them the food and water, had been martyred. They were bombed with more than 3 missiles. They are children. I talk about Mahmoud, 12 years, Uday is only 14. They are still kids and they killed with more than 3 missiles. They were killed in a pitiless way. The Red Cross team managed to enter the area and evacuate my uncle and his family by the ambulance to my home and took the bodies of my cousins to the hospital. It was really a difficult night. We stayed awake all the night waiting for Ahmed, my 3rd cousin who went to Al Zawaida to bring clothes for his kids. We lost contact with him and we didn't know anything about him. We contacted with the Red Cross team and told them that we lost another boy there at the same area. But unfortunately, the Red Cross team refused to go there, claiming that they cannot risk their team. So at that night, my brother Muhammad and 2 of my cousins went to search for Ahmed. However, they didn't find him neither in that area nor in any hospital. On the next morning, the men went to bury the 2 children, Mahmoud and Uday. After that, my brother Muhammad and 2 of my cousins went again to the same place to look for Ahmed, but they didn't find him. 14th January ended with a view to find Ahmed. We hoped that Ahmed would return to his family, to his friends, to his children, to his wife. Next day, on the early morning, January 15th, they went again to search for Ahmed. And at last, they found him. But unfortunately, it was too late. They found him lying down on the ground, his body frozen after being shot in his head. They took him to the hospital, and it turned out that he was killed 2 days ago. I mean, he was killed at the same day when Uday and Mahmoud were killed. I cannot express how sad we were during those days. To be honest, they were the most drastic days of our lives. What added salt to our injuries was the problem that we faced when we went to bury Ahmed's body. We didn't find enough space in the graveyards because of the large number of martyrs. Some martyrs were buried in hospital yards, others were buried in their homes, in front of their homes, inside their homes, even in the streets you can see graves. Only in Gaza you can see graves on the streets. As for Ahmed, he was buried at the same grave with Uday and Mahmoud. After digging up the grave, we hadn't any other option. We digged up the grave and put Ahmed with his 2 cousins. Ahmed's mother suffers from a heart disease and her health became worse after she had lost her son. And also she lost 2 of her son-in-law. She needs to make an operation urgently, otherwise she may get a heart attack. She has to travel to make this operation because all hospitals in Gaza are destroyed. She cannot travel due to the high fees implemented on Gazans. Can you imagine that you have to pay about $7,000 if you want to get out of Gaza? For one person only, about $7,000. It's like a dream. Also, my mother's health collapsed after the martyrdom of my cousins, especially Ahmed. She loves Ahmed very much. Ahmed was at the same age of my brother Muhammad. They are the childhood friends. My mother loves Ahmed too much and her health also became worse after his martyrdom. My mother suffers from diabetes mellitus type A. She hasn't taken the insulin injection since the beginning of war. It's not available in Gaza. And as you know, the lack of medicine for a chronic disease such as diabetes affects the health badly. And I don't forget my maternal aunt, who also lost her home during the war, and my aunt lives with us these days. My aunt has a cancer. She was supposed to take her chemotherapy 5 months ago. Her health is getting worse day by day. She needs urgently to take her chemotherapy. My 3 maternal uncles also lost their homes during the events. And now all of them live in plastic tents with their families. Each one of them has a family of not less than 5 members. Building a house in Gaza is not an easy thing. One of my uncles, wallahi, spent 14 years working as a builder outside Gaza. He forced to work outside Gaza. He forced to leave his family for 14 years just to build a good home for his family. And within a moment, he lost everything. He worked for 14 years, but now he has nothing. This is the story of all Gazans. In addition to the suffer of my uncles and aunts, I have 7 paternal aunts. All of them are married and have daughters, sons, and grandchildren, and also all of them evacuated. They evacuated either to schools or plastic tents. The situation at schools is extremely bad. There are about 3,000 or more than 3,000 people at the same school. All of them use the same toilet. You have to wait at least 8 hours to use the toilet. Can you imagine that? Can you live your life for 5 months without being able to have a shower or at least change your clothes? It's really very bad. In this war, I lost more than 5 of my close friends. My friend Islam was killed with her husband and she was pregnant. My friend Hind was killed with her kids and her husband. My friend Arwa with her sister and her husband and her little daughter were also killed. My friend Ansam was killed with her family. My friend Basima was killed 2 months ago, and she's still under the rubbles up to now. All of my friends were buried and I couldn't bid farewell them. I'm sure there are many others who were killed, but we don't know anything about each other because there's no telecommunications or internet. Many of my friends and students were lost, and I don't know anything about them since the 7th of October. I'm not sure if they are still alive or not. I remember my Dr. Rifat Al-Arir. They killed him along with his family because he was good in English and he translated the news in English and shared stories on his accounts. They killed him with his children, with his wife. He just conveyed a truth in English. He conveyed the truth to let the world know about their crimes here. And I may be killed anytime because I'm telling their crimes. Just because I'm telling what happened, I may be killed anytime. What I mentioned is a drop in their ocean of crimes. We lost in this war a lot, and we are still losing every single moment. I lost many of my family members, friends, colleagues, doctors, students, homes, memories, and everything. Even my job as a teacher. Because schools turned into shelters and others were destroyed. Even if the war stopped, I will not be able to work as a teacher because the educational system needs at least 5 years to be rebuilt again. I also lost my job as a freelancer translator due to the continuous internet cuts and total electricity cut since 5 months. We lost everything. But we still have our hopes, as I mentioned before. That's why I have launched a GoFundMe account to raise funds for my family, friends, neighbors, and students to give them the basic necessities of life. We will not evacuate Gaza, never ever. Even if we got a chance, even if we got enough money, we will not leave Gaza. Simply because this is our land and it will remain ours. We will inshallah rebuild our homes, rebuild our schools, even if they destroyed it 1,000 times. We will rebuild it again. So please share my story and share my GoFundMe link so that I can help my people and give them the basics of life. Thanks for listening, and may Allah bless you all, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
This recording was brought to you by IslamicMusicHub.com.